Hello, welcome to the video. Today, I wanted to take a break from painting miniatures and try making some terrain for a change. I like throwing in terrain once in a while. It just kind of breaks up the monotony of just painting nonstop, and it just gives you a nice little break. And it's something that I can always use on all of my games is more terrain for the tabletop. But I wanted to do something that I haven't seen very much of, but I think is important for most adventurers and for any medieval town that you might venture into, is somewhere to put your horses. As an adventuring party, most of us are riding on horses, traveling back and forth, and I don't really see stables used very much. So I thought I'd go ahead and make one. So if you'd like to see how I put one together, please stick around and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Is this a piece of terrain that you would use or you would never use? And let me know if there's a different piece of terrain that you would like to see done, but you don't really see too many people using. Maybe there's no tutorials out there and you would like to see somebody put one together. I like trying to make stuff that isn't common every day, items that you always see, and just something that's a little bit different. So I had a lot of fun doing this. I used some different techniques that I've never tried before. So I hope that you'll enjoy the video. And with that, let's go ahead and get started.
Okay, first I'm going to cut up my XPS foam. And here you can see that I cut out some shapes that are going to be used for using the beams, more or less for building the structure of the stables. And over here I cut some very thin sheets that I'm going to cut up into like floorboards and boards to use for the walls and such. And I cut all these on my Proxon, and I highly recommend, if you're going to be building a lot of terrain or using XPS foam a lot for doing this, you really should invest in a Proxon. It's a game changer. It makes this so much easier than trying to do it with a knife. I've tried multiple times using a knife, but no matter how many times I change the blades, they just seem to get dull really quick and tear up the foam. Now here I'm using these wire brushes that I got at the dollar store for $1.25. I got 3 of them. And I'm just going to use these to put some wood texture into the XPS foam. And you have to kind of go gently, like you kind of have to feel it out here for how hard the pressure that you want to put on this. Because if you go too hard, it'll tear it up too much. There seems to be a grain to the XPS foam. So you just have to, just a little bit of trial and error, just go over it a little bit easy and just sort of feel how the foam is reacting to the brush so that you're not tearing it up. Where if you get a nice feel for it, you can just kind of run it over it a few times. This is going to put some light wood texture into the wood, or into the foam rather. And I'm just going to do this to all of the foam pieces that I have here, including the beams. And then to enhance the wood grain a little bit more, I'm going to use a pencil and just kind of lightly go over this. I'm not pushing really hard or anything. I just wanted a little bit of variation into the wood. Because if this is for a village and they're making a stable, they're probably using rough timber for this. They're not using very refined and smooth lumber that we would have today. This is back in the medieval times, so I'm sure that they made do with whatever they had, and it would be a little rough. Also using the pencil here just to bang up the wood a little bit, just to add some maybe knot holes in it, or just to damage it a little, just so that it's not so perfectly straight 90-degree angle smooth cuts on everything, especially along the edges where it probably took a little bit of damage, things have banged into it and such. Don't go overboard with it. I just wanted to put just a little bit of character on this. Now for size, I'm using a Warhammer Chaos Marauder. And I wanted this mostly for my Baron's War game, but I don't have any of the horses just yet. So I decided to use this, even though it's a little bit bigger than what I need. And I'm just trying to plan out how big I really want these stables to be. What's going to be comfortable to get a horse inside the stalls without it being too huge or too small. And, I gotta say at the end, it's a little bit bigger than what I wanted because I was using this Warhammer figure. But, it's all on kind of what you want to make it. In the end, I decided to go with 5.5 inches by 4 inches. The door frames were 2.5 inches tall. The base that I'm using here is cardboard. Now, this is actually a really thin cardboard. It's not like the corrugated cardboard. It's double ply, but there's almost no gap in between the two layers. So it was sturdy enough and thin enough that I thought I could get away with it. Now, I know a lot of people prefer to use MDF boards for this, and that works really well. I just didn't have any on hand, and I thought that this cardboard would be good enough for this, because I almost contemplated on just not even putting a base on the stables, because I wanted this terrain to be very versatile, whether I had it on a grassy field or if I had it in a snowy area. You know, I didn't want to put green grass around it and then it's in some frozen tundra somewhere, some frozen village, and I didn't want to put snow around it, because if there's grass everywhere, then it's going to kind of look out of place, and I wanted to be able to use this anywhere. So I decided to just go with this. And one piece of advice I might say for making terrain and other projects is to just start. I started kind of overthinking this, and I kind of got paralyzed as to how I was going to make it, what size, what I was going to make it out of, and instead I just started just putting stuff together. If it's a little bit off, it's not a big deal. It can still be used for wargaming. You know, it's going to be on the tabletop at an arm's length distance. You're not going to be that close scrutinizing every little brick or every little piece of wood that's on this. So again, just start throwing stuff together, and it usually works out in the end, or else you can fix it, you know, use it for something else. If it gets too bad, use it for ruins, smash it up and use it for ruins. Here, I'm gonna start making my door frames, and I'm just using Gorilla Glue here to glue them together. I thought that Gorilla Glue would do a great job after it dried of really holding this. Now, it did take some time to dry, and as you'll see, I kind of go back and forth between the Gorilla Glue and hot glue. Now here I'm just double checking to make sure that the frames are the size that I want with the Baron's War miniature. And what I'm going to do is just put a little dab of hot glue on the bottom of these and stick them to the cardboard, because I wanted this to stick really fast. And hot glue does a great job on foam, as long as you're not holding it on there too long and letting it burn or melt the foam. I've had no problems with using it on there, and it does a quick, nice, secure job of holding it all together. One thing with this is I have to say that the foam is a little bit flimsy and tricky to work with here. So if you wanted to make this out of balsa wood or craft wood, I think that would be a good idea. You'd have a nice sturdy build. I just had a lot of scrap foam left over, so I just thought, hey, go with this and see what comes about. Now I'm going to start putting braces in between the frames here, just to add a little bit of sturdiness to it, because as I said, the foam is a little bit flimsy, and I'm using hot glue here. It would probably be a cleaner job to use the Gorilla Glue or another craft glue, but I was getting impatient, and as I said, the hot glue is really fast, and I was just kind of wanting to move this project along a little bit faster. So I was willing to take the mess that hot glue gives sometimes. And I'm not too worried, because we're going to cover this all up with a roof anyway, so you're not going to see some of this. So it's okay to be a little bit sloppy. And as you'll notice, this build is not perfect. It is not perfectly square. Some of my beams are not straight, but it's fine. I'm using this for wargaming. I don't want to spend hours and hours making sure that everything lines up exactly. And a lot of it's going to be hidden under a big roof anyway, so nobody's going to see this. And to me, it's just more important about getting it done before I lose interest in it. If you try to overcomplicate some of these builds, you're going to lose interest in them, or at least I do. I lose interest in them, or they become too overwhelming and too stressful trying to make. I'm just looking to have fun, be creative, and just get something nice to put on the tape. Now I'm going to start adding the boards to build the walls and the inside of the stalls here. And I'm just cutting these so that they're not too overly long and they look weird. And you also want to make sure to stagger the pattern of the boards. You don't want them all just straight up. You want some of the seams to be in the middle or on the sides. It gives it more of a realistic kind of random look when carpenters are building actual barns, or just as long as the seams sort of line up with the studs, the beams on here. And I'm just cutting them as I need them. I'm going to use Gorilla Glue here because I want a nice strong bond, and I don't feel like using the hot glue to dab each beam as I'm putting down the floorboards, or to put down the boards rather. I'm just going to coat them in the Gorilla Glue and then place the boards on where I want them and just go on from there. I decided to do only 2 walls on this for the stables. I figure with the stables, from the reference pictures that I looked at, most of them are pretty open to allow a lot of airflow going through. So I wanted to leave a good portion of this open. And I thought I would just put in the 2 stalls and then leave one area open for, you know, maybe the blacksmith coming in and doing something, or where they would keep some supplies. The really fun part of the build, just laying down the different boards and such, and, you know, making a pattern with them. I had a lot of fun doing this part of it. Once it was all dry, I came in and cut off some of the excess boards here. And now it's time to start on the roof. And I had to do a little bit of trial and error with this, but once I got started on it, it wasn't too bad. I just made sure to cut my angles so that the beams would go over the edge of the building just a little bit, not too much. And I just kind of cut the angles with them and then glued them together. Once they dried a little bit, now I was ready to attach them to the building. And because they're a little bit flimsy here, I wanted to use hot glue again because it just sets up so quick and easy that I wanted to be able to press these on and the glue was going to hold it immediately. And as with the rest of the structure here, I'm just putting some support beams in just to add a little bit of more stability to the build. And I was actually surprised at how much, you know, adding a little bit of support beam here and there, it kind of comes together like a real life structure. Before I go adding the final pieces to the roof, I decided to go ahead and base the building here. I thought it would be easier to do this before I couldn't get in there. And all I'm doing here is just adding some Elmer's glue and then just pouring this dirt that I have on, that I've had for years. And I just got this from a driveway. It's a mixture of rock, little tiny rocks and just kind of sand and dirt. But it does a really good job for basing. Now we can finally start the roof. And I have to say, I initially started trying to put down cardboard for a solid roof sheet, and it just wasn't working for me. And since I had a ton of these floorboards left over and they were super long, I just started gluing them on because I'm going to end up covering this up anyway with shingles or some kind of roofing material. At this point, I still hadn't made up my mind whether I was going to use shingles or try a thatched roofing. And again, once this is all dry, I just went back through and cut off the excess. I have to say, right now, the building is looking pretty good, and all of the supports that I've added to it really made it quite sturdy. I'm surprised at how it started. It was pretty flimsy, but it really helped. So I decided to try thatched roofing, and I have never done something like this. So this was quite interesting. This is kind of what I wanted to originally, but I thought maybe the shingles would have been easier. So this fabric here, it's almost like a fake fur that I have. It's from an old pillow that one of the dogs actually got a hold of and ripped a hole in it. So I thought, hey, this would be perfect to try to use. I'm basically going to cut 2 strips for each side. And then I'm going to cut a thicker middle piece to cover the top of the roof. And for this, I'm actually using fabric scissors because they cut through it so much better than regular scissors do. I'm just trying to cut as straight as possible here to keep everything pretty neat. And I have to say, this really made a mess cutting this. There was kind of hair everywhere. So it took a minute to clean it up afterwards, but I think it was well worth it. I'm really happy with how the results ended up coming out. Now I'm just gonna hot glue down each section. I'm gonna start at the bottom and then put the next one up a little bit over top of this one. Next, I'm getting out my mixture of Mod Podge, black paint, and a little bit of water. There's a ton of tutorials out there with how to make this exactly, but I just kind of mix it up until it's like the consistency of maybe a whole milk or something. Not too thick, but not too thin. It's just kind of like a little bit of experimenting that you have to do with it. But I'm just painting this over all of this, really globbing it on there so that it's going to give it, so that it's going to make sure that all of this fabric is really stuck together and laying down nicely. It's going to take it a while to dry, and I had to use the brush to really get in there and make sure that, you know, a lot of it wasn't, that it was kind of soaked through Now I didn't get too sloppy with it, but you want to make sure that you're getting it down into all of the fabric here. And while we're at it, we're just going to cover up all of the pink foam now with this. I'm putting on a thin coat here. I don't want it to be just running everywhere, but I'm just going to cover up all of the foam. I'm going to cover up all of the basing on here. It just gives everything, it gives it almost like a protective shell on it whenever the Mod Podge dries, and the black will give us a good base to paint off of. And I'm just putting this, again, I'm just trying to get this as much as possible on everything, and including the base, all of it. Now, had I to do this over again, I did have trouble getting inside of the stables here, with the roof on especially. I wish I would have painted the base of this all black before I put the roofing on. But again, I was so focused on how I was going to make the shingles or thatching, which one I was going to do, that I didn't pay attention. And that's something that would have made it a little bit easier. It was really no big deal though. I was able to get most of it. I just had to add a little bit of water to maybe get it to run in the areas that I couldn't reach as easy. Now I had to let this dry overnight because there was quite a bit of the mixture on there. And I'm just going to come in with these cheap craft paints, which I usually use for terrain because they're so cheap and there's huge areas. And I'm going to kind of do like a heavy dry brush over most of it. I'm going to start on the thatching here. And I'm really happy with how this turned out, even before painting it. But I'm just gonna kind of experiment with this. I'm going back and forth with what I think it needs. I started off with this light brown color, and then I'm gonna use a little bit of green in it, and then I go to a more yellow. But again, as I said, there's no set pattern to this. I just kind of go back and forth with what I feel looks good. And I'm really happy with how the different colors turned out. I think adding that little bit of green in there, not overdoing it, but just a little touch of it, really added a little bit of character to it. Now for the woodwork, I'm just coming in here with a dark brown first, and then I'm gonna slowly lighten it up. Just add a little bit of highlights here and there, especially on the edges as they go along. I wanted this to just kind of look like it's just old wood that's been out in the weather for quite a while. You know, it just has like a dirtier look to it. It's been out, it's got some smoke on it. But yeah, just kind of go back and forth. You can make it as light or dark as you want, whatever's going to fit in with the rest of your terrain. And here I'm just building the frames for the doors of the stables. And I'm just making it pretty simple. I didn't want to get too complicated with this. I'm just using the Gorilla Glue to glue them together. Let them set for a little bit because I wanted them to be semi-clean because the hot glue, you know, it can make a mess with it. So I figured that the Gorilla Glue would be a little cleaner here. And then I'm just putting this cross beam to add stability to them. And I had to just go back and forth a little bit with how to cut the angle on it, but it wasn't too bad to figure out. And I think it came out really cool. Now, while that's drying, I came up with what I thought was a big brain idea. Now this might have been done 100 times before, but I haven't seen it before. And I noticed that in the garage I had this old rough twine rope. And I thought this would be perfect to make some hay or some straw to just throw around in the stables. I didn't want to coat the entire floor with it, but I just wanted sort of a little bit down where, you know, it had fallen. I'm sure if you've been around horses or stables at all, there's always straw and hay laying around. And all I'm doing is just cutting this into little pieces using my scissors. And I was kind of amazed at how good this looked for a little bit of straw to throw around on the floor. Now to add it in, all I'm doing is watering down a little bit of PVA glue. And actually I put a little bit of dirty water in there. I'm hoping that it stains the rope some. And once I got a coating down where I want it, I'm just sprinkling in the straw and just letting it kind of fall on the floor a little bit. Once I had it in there, then I went back with some more of the watered down PVA glue with a little bit of the dirty water on it and just tapped on the straw to tap it down into place and to add a little more color to it. I have to say, I was pretty darn happy with the results of this. I think it looks really cool. And here it is all finished. I'm really happy with it. I mean, this project took on a little more than what I thought it would, but I think it was well worth it. It's what I wanted in the end, so that's all that really matters. It's a little rough here and there, but As I said, I just kind of wanted to get this on the table. It was my first attempt at trying a building like this. And I gotta say, for tabletop quality and for gaming purposes, it's gonna do the job just fine. I think it was well worth the effort. So I hope that you enjoyed the video, and I hope that you enjoyed watching me put this together. And I just want to say thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye.